Good morning. Wise choice. Of all the things and all the options you can do, I want to commend you. The opportunity for this 4-day seminar is really pretty unique. I would trade any semester I had at any of the university settings I studied for the 4 days four opportunities you have, if I wanted to learn about Israel and that region. Our guest is Ronny Simon. I'll introduce him in a moment, but a couple of just housekeeping things. He'll give you a break this morning. I'm sure he will. He's merciful. And at the break, there'll be coffee available. If you know where the coffee is on the weekends, those of you who are veterans here help the rest of those who are guests with us this morning. But they'll brew some coffee and have that available. If Ronny drinks a cup, that ensures you he won't go too long with the second session. So, no, we are honored to have him back. This is a very, I never thought I would stand in a church in America and say we find ourselves in a place where the broader culture is giving public expression to hatred for Jews and Christians. But we have arrived in that place. And the response shouldn't be one of anger or violence, but we have to inform ourselves and we have to look at the reality of where we are and be prepared to respond. You know, the latest is that the Israelis are responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination. And that's getting some pretty significant play, which it's not new. I don't want to do Ronnie's speech, he'll tell you that. But the Jewish people have been blamed for plagues, for droughts, for the causing world wars, for financial collapses. It's not a new story. And I pray you learn enough this week to help you awaken from a slumber of lack of awareness, because God is moving in the earth and we want to join him. But to do that, we have to understand the attitudes and the game plans of the adversary. So we need the spiritual equivalent of an iron dome. All right? I will apologize in advance. We're not because we're under construction. We are through these windows. I will apologize because there could be some noise from construction. If it's too intrusive, we'll relocate this meeting tomorrow. The most likely place would be All Nations Sanctuary, if you're familiar with the campus. If you're not, it's into the lobby, and when you go into the lobby, turn left. But for the moment, we'll plan on it being here unless you're told otherwise. But we're delighted you're here, and I don't want to take any more of Ronnie's time. Let's say a quick prayer, and then I'll introduce him. Father, thank you that we have the liberty and freedom to gather together in a public place, in a church, and tell the truth. I pray now you'll give us listening ears and understanding hearts, that nothing will interrupt or intrude or diminish what you have for each of us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Our speaker today, he's not a guest, he's a part of the family. Ronny and I have worked together for more than 20 years. He is a tour guide in Israel, but he's far more than that. He's as fine a historian on the region as I know anywhere in the world. He served in the IDF as a lieutenant colonel. For many years, as a joke, I said he was a member of the Mossad. And he would always say to me, you can't say that anymore. In our current environment, I probably shouldn't say that. So I won't tell you that I think he was a member of the Mossad. But they would have been better if he had been. Help me welcome my friend, Ronny Simon.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming. I always start my seminars by apologizing for my accent, all right? It's an accent. I'll try to slow down to make the message as clear as possible, but this is one promise I'm not going to keep. I tend to speed up. Then I can tell that people are losing me. Pastor, when you introduced me, you used to say he's a hitman for the Mossad, not just Mossad. That was the problem. And you could tell how people's eyes are open, they take a step back, and they won't even shake my hand. This was not the case, so we have enough fake news around the world without adding to that. All right? I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, Pastor Ellen, for having me and be able to develop a whole story that most people only have those nuggets and sound bites: Israel, Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims, Gaza, colonialism, apartheid, racism, all those slogans that the world is using, especially recently. My plan is to try to give you a long, boring history lecture, okay? And we'll go from one key point to the other. Number one, because people need to be educated. And there was so much deception out there and so much disinformation out there, I don't want to add to that. Saying that, I also encourage you not to trust a word that I'm saying. You go and check. You go and confirm. Because as much as I try to be objective, I cannot be totally objective. I'm an Israeli. I'm deeply involved emotionally, obviously, in everything that happens. I'll try not to get too emotional, especially coming closer to our era, speaking about the war in Gaza. That will only happen on Thursday. But it's very personal to all of us. And therefore, to try to zoom out and to see that from above, for me, won't be easy. Your job will be to try to take notes. If there's something that you don't like in what I'm saying, go and check. I'll be more than happy to have a conversation. I will be here for the next couple of days. I'll be more than happy to correct my sources. If you have any better sources, let's make it an experience of education to both of us. I'm more than happy to debate about the issue. I cannot debate with ignorance. And unfortunately, that's what most people show. The brightest American youngsters in Ivy League universities are chanting and screaming and crying out and very zealous for something they have no clue about. This is so embarrassing, especially when you ask them questions. What is it that you're supporting? And what river? And what sea? And what is colonialism? They don't have a clue. Which means that we live in a very dangerous era, if I may say that. Because what is the truth? I know that we all have the answer. The Word of God is the truth. I wish that everybody will share that kind of sentiment. So we are dealing with struggles on many different levels. And let me submit to you, for years and years and years, people in the world, here in America, were watching the Middle East with a distance, some concern. It happens over there. We are not engaged. It's not our problem. How wrong we all were, I guess we understand now. I'm not even speaking about 9/11. I'm speaking about investing billions of dollars by a country called Qatar in your universities, indoctrinating a whole generation, and everything is based on lies. So how easy it is to manipulate great people, intelligent people. How easy it is to build a story which is all fake. And who will be there to just ring the bell and say, just a minute now. This is a whole industry of lies. Let's go and check for the facts. And therefore, my purpose is to go back to the middle of the 19th century. Some of you would like to leave already? The 19th century. That's where the story begins. Because we need to understand and simply dismantle all these arguments that the Jews are colonialists and the Jews came to steal the land from the poor Palestinians and they are the indigenous people of the land, etc. I will not criticize the Muslim faith as a faith because I'm not a theologian, but I don't have to be. For the last 15 years, more than 1 million people were killed in the Middle East. Muslims were butchering Muslims in behalf of their religion. That's a fact, all right? The war in Syria, the war in Libya, the war in Yemen, we speak about more than 1 million people. That's all I need to know about a religion. And therefore, we understand that since the problem was always religious, we can't hide it anymore. We need to understand the motivation. And the most important thing, we need to try to see what is the future holding for us. The past is the past. We can discuss that in many different ways. I will not be able to convince anti-Israelis that we are right. They will not be able to convince me that they are right. It led us to a full-scale confrontation for the last 2 years in Gaza. What's next? And the problem is that when you look at the options for the future, they are not happy. When you hear the same message delivered time after time after time, we're going to repeat October 7th again and again and again, and that has a majority among the Palestinians, it's hard to be an optimist. Well, we know how the book ends, but we need to hold on until the end time, so to speak. And we know who are the good guys or the bad guys. But again, you won't hear that from me for the last couple of days. I really want to try to focus on the facts, and that will be not easy for you to follow. There will be a lot of information, let me warn you right away, coming up and down the screens over there. I'm not a disciplined speaker. So your challenge is to try to follow the screens, try to follow me, and if there is a contradiction between the two, after you're used to my funny accent, you make a decision, what is it that you want to follow, the screen or myself? It won't be easy. I also try to include a lot of video segments. Some are very old. You'll see the Western Wall at 1928, because the Western Wall is the focal point as a symbol of religious conflict. Everything is somehow evolved around Temple Mount in Jerusalem, around the Western Wall. Did you know that Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran, not even once? You go and read all 114 chapters of the Quran, you will not find the name Jerusalem. So the question should be, what's the connection of Islam and Jerusalem? Technically, no connection. How can you say that? You will approach me when it's all about the Holy Land, and this is the essence of all the conflict, is about Jerusalem. Well, again, that's just a fact. I'm not being biased. Jerusalem is not mentioned by name in the Quran. What made it so important? We'll get to that, but just one example. Another example, if I may, and that will be impossible for me to clarify totally, but you get the point. Sharing history is easy. How can you share mindsets? How can I try to explain to you what is the worldview of a person that lives in the land of Israel? How he sees the world around him? What will be his approach to the Western world? Because, and we can't help it, we are projecting our views and our intelligence, so to speak, and we think that the whole world has the same way of thinking as we do. For example, if two Americans have a problem, usually they will sit down to the table over a cup of coffee, they will discuss the matter, they'll find a solution, usually a logical solution. It doesn't work like that in the Middle East. It's not about finding solution. It's not about coexisting. It's one party wants to utterly destroy the other party. And if this is your mentality, what are we going to negotiate about? What are we going to discuss? What kind of future we are going to work for the best interest of both people? For years and years and years, the focus was on politics. We do not speak about religion, we speak about politics. The Palestinian people, they want to have a land, they are a nation, because once you speak about these things, we can reason. Once you bring it up or down to the religious level, that's the end of any discussion. That's the end of any understanding, because the gods did not authorize you to make concessions in their behalf. So we're very careful not to touch the religious issue. How naive we were, now we know. It was about religion, it is about religion, it will always be about religion. In this case, we do speak about the Muslim world on one side, and let's call it Judeo-Christian on the other side. You're part of it as well. Listen to their media. You are the great Satan, and we are the little Satan. That's not a national term, that's a religious term. So what I'm going to share with you is very much going to be everybody's business, even in this room, because it's global. When they shout, globalize the Intifada, Americans in America. What they speak about basically is anarchy, revolution, destroying the America as we know. Not foreigners from the Middle East. Americans are shouting that, stepping on the flags of Israel, the US. There is a problem in this country, a problem in Europe. Unfortunately for us, we hold the front line. So we are in a daily contact, a daily fight against Islam, and that's not the case in America yet. But unless we wake up, and unless we take some steps, it may well be. I also need to apologize for my cold, all right? I have a cold and my nose is running every now and then. So whenever I reach to the Kleenex box, you go like this. Fair enough? Let's practice once. Okay, go ahead. This is embarrassing. Oh, thank you. Somebody muted me. Thank you. You have some true friends in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, amen. Let us begin. So here is the topic of what we're going to speak about. Is it working? It's not moving for some reason. Oh yes, it is moving. All right, that will be the topic, and that's what we'll try to do in the next few days that I'll be with you. And once again, there will be a lot of facts, okay? We'll go for about 50 minutes or so. We'll break for 10 minutes. We'll come back. I'll be more than happy and available to have a chit-chat with anybody who wants to approach and ask questions. Let's just enjoy the week and let's get a little more educated if possible. One last comment before we start. The story is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The story is not the Israeli-Arab conflict. These are symptoms. The story is radical Islam on one side and the rest of the world on the other side. I know that that's not easy for people to understand, and it's not even kosher to say those things in some places in America. But if we keep ignoring the problem, we are not accomplishing anything. All right? And time is not in our favor. And you know what? It's even a bigger story. How easily people can be manipulated. How easily you can take bright people and build the whole narrative made of lies for people to follow. How naive we can get. Now, if you're confused, and I am, there's no problem. But if leaders of countries, having advisors, they don't have a clue, and all they know is from media and fake news, etc., it's a world problem. And let me also submit to you that if you know the Middle East because you graduated in Harvard and you took a course in Princeton, you don't know the Middle East. It's more than just open the book to read. You need to understand the mentality. Unless you understand how people think over there, you cannot have a clever policy because you misunderstand the whole story. So it's a misunderstanding, basically. We think that we know what they think. They think that we know what they think as well, but we're not. We come from totally different understandings and mentalities, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in the world of narratives, and narratives by definition are not the truth. Everybody, including the state of Israel, we have a narrative of Zionism, which is not the fact necessarily. So if you want to follow a narrative, you need also to know. I'm willing to listen to a story, but that story is not the truth. That story is a combination of some facts, a lot of folklore, some sheer lies in order to make a story. And maybe the most common story over the last few decades will say the following. Once upon a time, in a land called Palestine, happy people used to live. They were simple people. They lived in towns and villages, a simple way of life. They had their institutions. They celebrated their holidays. They were peaceful and loved their jobs and loved the world. And suddenly, out of the blue, a group of savages sent by the world powers invaded this foreign land, destroyed the locals, stole their land to build the Jewish state. With the help of America and Britain and France, that's the narrative. And you add to that the indigenous people of the land, and who does the land belong to, and colonialism, and apartheid, and ethnic cleansing, and genocide, all this mishmash of terms that everybody uses as if this is the truth. But it's not, and we're going to specify each one of them to try to explain the story. Look at the map, and just one look at the map will tell you what Israel is dealing with. You do see the Arab area. It doesn't show you the Muslim countries, it only shows you the Arab countries. I need to make a distinction, it's important. To be an Arab indicates your culture, civilization, the language that you speak. It's not a nation, not a religion, and not an ethnicity. I'm not being anti-Arab, right? These are the facts. So many people can practice the Muslim religion, but they are not Arabs. In fact, most of the Muslims in the world are not Arabs. A country like Indonesia, 230 million people are Muslims, they're not Arabs. A country like Malaysia, half of Nigeria, What's missing on the map over there is Turkey and Iran, two very strong Muslim countries, but not Arabs. And to make it more complicated, within the Muslim world, they're divided into two main groups, Sunnis and Shiites. And they are at war against each other. So there's no unity in the Muslim world. But once you use the term Arab, you need to know you're not indicating a religion. Many Arabs are Christians. They will follow the Christian faith. They'll be Catholics, Greek Orthodox, they're Arabs. You know what? Jews that lived in Arab countries will be Arab Jews. They are Jewish, of course, by their nationality and religion, but they speak Arabic, they eat Arabic food, good food, by the way. They have the Arabic culture, songs, stories, they're Arabs. I know it's confusing, but it's important to pay attention to these details. So the map over there only shows you the Arab countries in the area, not just the Muslim ones. And you do see that the chances for a small country to survive in such a tough neighborhood are not that big if it wasn't God's plan. So one look at the map will tell you what is Israel facing. But we're going to go to the beginning and the roots in just a minute. By the way, you do see this whole map over there. The source of the Arabs is Saudi Arabia of today. This is not working. Well, it worked a minute earlier anyhow. That's where the Arab world started. The rest of it was conquered by the Arabs. After the death of Muhammad, we speak about the 7th century, they started conquest to colonize the world. That's colonization. There was a key to know. How many countries around the world speak English? Well, Kenya, for example, speak English, but they're not English. They were colonized by the British, so they speak English. How many countries in the world speak Arabic? Quite a lot, but they did not start as Arabic speaking. They were conquered by the Arabs, and that's why they speak Arabic. How many countries speak Hebrew around the world? How many countries the Jews had conquered to colonize them? Just the state of Israel. And therefore, one understanding of colonization is how much your culture is spread around the world. All right? And this will be, therefore, the sphere of the Arab countries and the Arab culture. As I was saying, just to bring that to a conclusion, we're going to speak about 3 or 4 main objects. I do want to add to that some, I'll say, chronology. We're going to go step by step. It will make much more sense than just to speak about topics and then to try to get them together. That will not be possible. And the sources, well, there are plenty of sources. There's a lot of information out there. I prefer to use documents which are not Israelis, all right? Because then you would accuse me, of course they will say that it's an Israeli document. I will use it sometimes, but there's so much information. I have to tell you, it's an obsession. Any idea how many universities around the world are dealing with that issue? They have courses and curriculums and professors about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You know how much money is dedicated? It's an hysteria. You look at the world media. People are getting killed in Congo by the thousands every day. Who speaks about Congo, for goodness sake? By the way, it's the essence of anti-Semitism. We'll get to that Friday. What takes the attention is always what happens between the Jews and the Palestinians. Why? Has to be a reason, right? You know how many people died in Yemen from Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates? United Nations figures, 82,000 children were starving to death in Yemen. Who even speaks about that? It doesn't matter. Nobody cares about it. So you hear some frustration in my voice. There's a lot of information out there. Some more reliable, some less reliable, but plenty. We speak about the League of Nations, United Nations, plenty of that. If you lived in the Middle East until WW1, that's how the map used to look like. We'll start even earlier. You don't see countries, you don't see nations, you don't see borders. There is no Syria, there is no Lebanon, there is no Saudi Arabia, no Kuwait, no Israel, no Iraq. Am I suggesting, therefore, that these countries did not exist? That's what I'm saying. Until about a century ago, the Middle East was not divided to nations and was not divided to people. Basically, there were no borders. It was all part of the Ottoman Empire. So if you had the chance to chat with somebody who lived in a place called Baghdad and ask him or her a question, sir, ma'am, how do you define yourself? Who are you? The answer will be the following. I'm an Arab, indicating his lifestyle. Most likely I'm a Muslim, and I belong to a tribe, a clan. And then you say, yes, but what is your nationality? He didn't have one. The idea that in years there will be a country called Iraq that will also include nationality wasn't even born yet. And therefore he was a citizen of the Ottoman Empire who lived in the province of Mesopotamia. He did not have a nationality. In the Middle East, even today, people live in tribes and clans since biblical days. They do not understand the concept of nations, and it's not patronizing them, it's a choice. You know what, even Europe. You thought that there was always a Germany as we know it today? Not before 1866. Germany was the creation, if you wish, of Otto von Bismarck, a great politician. He was the one that brought all the German-speaking small principalities together under Prussia to create Germany. There was no Italy, by the way, until 1860. There were different semi-independent kingdoms until the national aspect kicked in and they created a nation. So even for us in the Western civilization, the idea of nationalities is a new idea. And it took Europe a long time to understand that. Why do we expect the Arabs to embrace that in a shorter time? That's really, in a way, patronizing the way that they live because we know so much better than they. We wanted to bring democracy to Iraq. I'm not criticizing President Bush, he was a real ideologist. Was it working? Not really. And we know that democracy, the best system ever, right? Well, says who? It's a misunderstanding, right? Some people are not accustomed to think in national terms. The Middle East is a good example. If you had the chance to chat with somebody who lived in Jerusalem, same question. Sir, ma'am, how do you define yourself? The answer will be, I'm an Arab or Jewish. I live in a province called Palestine, a resident of the Ottoman Empire. But then you would ask, are you not a Palestinian, sir? No. The term Palestinian wasn't even born. You know what? Until 1967, you will not find in documents the idea that there is a people called the Palestinians and they have a right for a land. I'll prove that to you. And therefore, the whole idea of nations and the whole idea of borders in the Middle East wasn't even born yet. Let's speak about the core issues in the conflict that everybody is conveniently ignoring, because once you touch on that, you understand the problem. There is a certain status of people who live in Muslim countries. If you live in a Muslim country and you're not a Muslim, you have a special category which is called the dhimmi. Until this very day, by the way, in many of them. A Christian can be a dhimmi, a Jew can be a dhimmi, which means people that we give them the right to live because they also have a book they believe is the Word of God, and all the others, the pagans, should be killed and wiped out. So the idea of dhimmi is critical because the Muslim world is treating the Jews as second-class citizens. It's built in the whole system. Can you imagine what happens today when the Jews are strong and prosperous and defeating the Muslims time after time? They will never, ever accept it. So problem number one is to understand the other side. Because for the last more than a century, the Muslim world is being humiliated time after time. Ever since the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the way they understand it, it's not that the Allies won the war. Islam was defeated by Christianity. It's a whole different understanding, wouldn't you agree? It's not that nations went to war over resources and power. Somebody won, somebody lost. No. The Muslim world was defeated by Christians and now by Jews. Do you understand the level of frustration? Islam is teaching victory and domination and not defeat. And that's what happens. Islam had two glorious days over the last century. 9/11 and October 7th. Read those sources, read what they say about that. That will be the sentiment. So the issue is not the nation, the issue is the religion, the faith. Islam was humiliated. By the way, the Muslim leaders, Arab leaders, will never accept the existence of a Jewish state in the very heart of what they believe is Muslim territory. So for the Muslim mindset to treat Jews as equals and then maybe as superior is simply a disgrace. Arabs who live in Israel, they don't like living in Israel, but they do understand that they have rights and benefits, and the only Arabs in the Middle East who live in Israel are the only free Arabs in the Middle East, equal citizens like anybody else, like myself in Israel. And you would say, they should be happy, right? No, they are frustrated because in their own Muslim culture, they don't have any rights, they are abused, there is no freedom. The only place they do have freedom is in Israel. So think about Muslims immigrating to Europe and coming to America. From the very beginning, they go to a place they believe should become Muslim, because just like they treated all the others as dhimmis, they think they will be treated by the local society in the same way. And many of them are coming to different countries. By the way, why nobody is immigrating to Muslim countries? Nobody does. Isn't that admitting, or at least saying, okay, maybe something is wrong? But pay attention, the focus is on Islam. And therefore, the nature of the conflict in the area, as I tried to convince you already here, will be indeed a problem which is built in the Muslim religion. And the problem is that they think that everybody wants to treat them the same way they were treating the others. They do not understand why other people will show kindness, will give them equal rights, when they denied those rights from everybody else who lived in their country when they were superior. Please keep that in mind, because it's critical to understand the whole evolution of what will happen later on. And then the Arabs have a claim, obviously, that there's no connection between the Jews and the land of Israel. We are foreigners on that land. And therefore, the indigenous people are not the Jews, of course, but the locals. Well, forgive me, how stupid that is. Can anybody really question the linkage of the Jewish people and the land of Israel? You know your Bibles. Everything in the Old Testament speaks about the Hebrew kingdoms, Judah and the northern kingdom, Israel, and the prophets, and the whole story is related geographically to one land. And the Jewish dream, ever since the great exile of 70 AD, is to return and to restore the nation. In every prayer, a Jewish person says, next year in Jerusalem. You enter synagogues and the wall that has the ark in it is facing Jerusalem. You break a glass when you're getting married because nothing is perfect. The temple is in ruins. We're going to commemorate that by breaking a glass in the most important day of our lives, the day that we're getting married. So to say the Jews have no connection to Israel or to Palestine or Jerusalem, it's more than ridiculous, it's pathetic. But you confront them with the facts, like archaeology. What about Temple Mount? It's standing there. Oh, no, that was a Jebusite structure, and they were worshiping the moon. Jews are not connected. And listen, many people are following that narrative. There is no connection between the Jews and the land of Israel. So when you speak about colonialism, people that were foreigners came to conquer a land, you cannot conquer your own homeland. All right? And the Jews did not come as foreigners, and there was always a Jewish presence in the land. And this is important to keep in mind, because that's what you hear from them all the time. In years to come, in 1937, the British, not friends of Israel, sent a committee to inquire what can be done in the chaos in the country, and that's Great Britain admits that the land was always Jewish, and therefore it should be Jewish once again. So just an example about what the world was thinking about what's going on, but again, you hear this argument all the time. Just one of so many prophecies in the scriptures that speak about the regathering of the nation. We believe that Israel is a fulfillment of that prophecy and many others. So to say that we are not connected to the land, it is indeed ridiculous. By the way, embarrassing for the Muslims, look what the Quran says about the land of Israel. It's in the Quran. I didn't make up any of it. They don't like to be reminded that that's what their book is teaching. Does it say it very clear? Well, they will add to that, yes, but only as slaves to Islam. It doesn't say that. It does say, according to their views, that Allah gave the land to the children of Israel. All right, here are the quotes over there. You're most welcome to go and check. And again, prove me wrong. I'd be more than happy to get into a conversation. I do want to skip some of what I'm saying because there's not enough time, all right? And I keep apologizing. Excuse me, but I need to skip this slide or the other one. Let's engage in some definitions. Colonialism. And this is from Wikipedia. I'll be quick to admit, okay? That's the definition over there. When you read what is a colonialist, it doesn't really fit what happened in the area. Because usually a wealthy superpower will send its army into a foreign land to conquer the land, to exploit the riches of the land, and send it back home to enrich the country. That's not what happened in Palestine. Jews that fled from oppression bought land, farmed the land. They did not come as masters. And who exactly sent the Jews back to Palestine? America or Britain or France? Of course not. But everybody screams today, colonialism. Israel is a colonialist entity. You cannot be colonizing your own homeland. And that would be the case of colonialism. That's why I mentioned that, because everybody is using this one. Well, I made up a new term, forgive me, but you can use that in my behalf. I give you permission. What about religious colonialism? You won't find it. I just made it up when I made the presentation, okay? Isn't that what we see that happens in Europe, for example? Infiltration of millions of Muslims coming as Muslims, not as Arabs. And they are commanded, all right, to convert the whole continent to Islam. And that can happen without firing a single bullet. And it happens as we speak. It's not an anti-Muslim comment. That is their stated goal. Once again, you know the drill. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry. Very sorry about that. I'm not sure. It doesn't happen very often. Let's try to speak about this. Genocide. All right? Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. Each such term has international definition. What will be considered genocide? Do you know that the third fastest growing population on our planet are the Palestinians in Gaza? 2.2 million people today, 300,000 in 1967. If we want to commit genocide, we do a lousy job. This population grows faster than most populations on the planet. And it speaks about intent. If you really have an intention to commit genocide, we can do that in a heartbeat. We have the weaponry. You know how hard we try to distinguish a Hamas terrorist from an innocent Palestinian. You can't always know who is innocent because they never wore uniforms when they go to battle. So who is the bad guy and who's just a civilian? So to speak about genocide, no, but when you are shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, you speak about a genocide against the Jewish people. So how can you say the same sentence? I'm talking about those bright students. I'm not even being sarcastic. Bright young people. You speak about the rights of the Palestinians because Israel commits a genocide, and the same sentence, from the river to the sea, the Jews basically will be eliminated. That's what it means. Palestine will be free. I can make up those slogans as well. Very easy, but they won't be that popular. How about from the river to the Med, Palestine is already dead. Don't quote me, please, all right? But the question is, what do people believe in? What does it mean? When you talk to them, some of them don't even know what it means. You said, just a minute, that you just called for the elimination of the Jews in Israel. No, I didn't. You just did. When you speak about from the river to the sea, that's what you mean basically. And then sometimes you see these bulbs, say, oh, okay, so maybe it should be ignorance. Ignorance, the combination of zeal and ignorance is a devastating combination. And that's what we see, unfortunately, in many of the places. Apartheid, the easiest one to refute. Many of you have been to Israel, I believe. The only Arabs in the Middle East that live in freedom are the Israeli Arabs. They are Israelis. They have Israeli IDs. They can vote in the elections. They can be elected. Every position is open to them. We had an Arab judge who sent a president of the state to jail because of rape. You find them in every field of life in Israel. They are part of the state of Israel. The confusion begins when it comes to the Palestinians. Are the Arabs, are Palestinians? Yes, no. We'll get to that. And therefore, the easiest one for me to say that's absolutely ridiculous is the apartheid claim. Come to Israel. You cannot tell who is a Jew, who is an Arab. We live together. There's one exception. Serving in the army is not mandatory for the Arabs, just for the Jews. They can volunteer, and some do. But besides that, every opportunity is open to them. You find them everywhere. So apartheid, not in Israel. I'll show you where you have apartheid. In Lebanon, and Syria, and Egypt. Because the Palestinian refugees who fled to these countries are treated, even as we speak, 80 years later, worse than dogs. They have zero rights. They're grandchildren by now. They live in camps. They cannot commute. They cannot leave the camps. Education is minimal. There's no future, no hope. That's apartheid. Not in Israel. In the Arab countries and the way they treat their own brothers and sisters who they invited to come and take shelter. And now they're treated in such a way in the Middle East. So that will be apartheid and not the state of Israel. I thought that it's important for you to understand as well. You know what? Let's move this one. Racism, and with your permission, we'll speak about ethnic cleansing as well. Give you an example. Give an example when the state of Israel officially ethnically cleansed anything. And some will say, just a minute now, there was a war of independence in 1948, and you loaded people on trucks and you sent them to the country. No, that did not happen. We'll get to that, we'll speak about it in details. Where was ethnic cleansing? 1 million Jews that lived in Arab countries had to run for their lives because their lives were in danger. The Jewish community in Babylon/Iraq, they are the indigenous people of the land, not the Iraqis. They are there from the days of Ezekiel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. These people had to run for their lives. That's ethnic cleansing. Whoever speaks about that? What happens in Gaza today? We are attacking a place. We give them a warning days before. Pack everything temporarily. Go to find shelter. What army in the world was giving a warning for the enemy, losing the element of surprise completely, to give them a chance to save their lives? And the message is, go to safe places. We'll be done with destroying Hamas. Come back home. Everybody ignores the come back home. So that's ethnic cleansing. And that's the argument the world is using when it speaks about Israel and ethnic cleansing, just so that you would know. Let's set the scene now historically. Palestine. What is Palestine? Since when? Whose idea was it to name the place Palestine? Well, I'll take you back now to 135 AD. 135 AD, that's a long time ago. After the Jewish people rebelled against Rome, time after time after time, the Romans had enough. After a rebellion of a Jewish leader called Bar Kokhba that ended in 135 AD, the Roman Emperor, Adrian, was so upset with the Jews, rebelling repeatedly, that he decided to rename the province of Judea, so every linkage between Jews and Judea will be broken by the name Palestine. Named after who? After people that you know from the scriptures called the Philistines, from Greek origin that Rome was in a way close to. So the name Palestine was a political act by a very upset Roman emperor to name the place after the people that he was closer to, the Philistines, and call it Palestine. That's how the term was born. It never had clear borders. It was never an independent state. There were no people that carried the title Palestinians. I do not know the name of this county, but the name of the county is not your nationality, am I right? It's just an administrative term. So that's how Palestine came to be, and that was the reason of the Roman emperor to name the place Palestine. Taking you back now to the, let's say, the middle of the 19th century. In fact, all this was just the introduction, I'm sorry. Let's go a little deeper to understand what we are talking about. Here is a map of the region over there. You see the red arrow pointing at Palestine. No borders, no lines, no nations, all part of the Ottoman Empire. In the 19th century, and that's what we're talking about, that would be the turning point. The Ottoman Empire, that's modern-day Turkey, was in a stage of collapse. Turkey was holding the front line with Russia, and that, I'll show you the map in just a minute. All of Europe was afraid that Russia is going to go down to the Mediterranean Sea. Turkey was holding the line. Europe was supporting the Ottomans to stop the Russians. There was a reason why Vladimir Putin occupied Crimea in 2014, because that was the dream of Russia from times immemorial. If you want to be an empire, you want to be a key player, you have to have access to hot water harbors. And that's the Black Sea, that's Crimea, and then the Mediterranean Sea. Because all around Russia, water is freezing. 6 months of the year, you cannot really navigate. The Russian fleet is trapped in its harbors. And the only place you can go in and out and show your presence around the world is going through hot water, Black Sea, Crimea. That will be the point of tension, and few things don't change. The reason why Putin is so insisting to hold Crimea from the Ukrainians, that's the reason. So Turkey is there to try to stop the Russians. All of Europe is backing Turkey. Christian superpowers are supporting the Muslim superpower. Even by that definition, it's a humiliation for the Ottoman Empire. But it happens so often that the Ottomans are in debt financially. They cannot really pay the money that they owe to the European powers, and they decide to compensate them with land. And what will be the main interest of the European Christian superpowers? Land in Palestine. Christian holy sites, many of them, that were in Muslim hands, in ruins in most cases. So there will be a trade-off in a few years to come. Thank you for helping us, would say the Sultan. I don't have the money to pay back what I owe you, but I can give you some privileges and some capitulation, that will be the name, in Palestine. You can buy land in Palestine. You can open consulates in Palestine. Unheard of. Turkey was not engaged on any level with any of the European superpowers. I want to recommend the book for those of you that like to read, that was authored by an authority, Bernard Lewis was his name, an American, British, Jewish historian. And the book is called What Went Wrong? And he tries to answer the question, how come the Ottoman Empire was left so way behind? 2 centuries earlier, they led the world. Within 200 years, they were left behind because of the innovations of Europe, the Industrious Revolution, the years of enlightenment. The Ottomans were not part of it, but there was a reason why. We are Muslims. What can the Christians possibly teach us? We are superior. We are not learning anything from those European powers, because only Islam is right, and the rest of the world can't teach us anything. Bottom line, they were really left way behind. And it's humiliating. Suddenly, European armies are coming to back the Ottomans, and they are much better equipped and much stronger. Something was dead wrong here. That was the new mindset. So the Ottomans, against the will, have to offer all those rights and all those capitulations, as it was called, to those superpowers. And again, In a very short time, there was a massive presence of Christians in the land with Ottoman's permission. By the way, by Sharia law, which is the law of Islam, if a Muslim owned land and he sells the land to a non-Muslim, you're facing death. It's a rule in America as well. If a Muslim owns property and the property is sold to a non-Muslim, technically that's what should happen. Happens in Israel. Sometimes we buy land which is private land. Sometimes they don't know who they sell the land to because they work through a third party. But once they do know, they have to run for their lives. They will be murdered. All right? I'm not exaggerating. Keep that in mind. But the Ottomans had a need, had a problem. And therefore they offer land, and the land is given to these Christian powers, and for the Jews, an opportunity. If it's just about money, and the Ottomans are willing to sell, let us buy some land in Palestine/Israel and start bringing people back home. Now it's an opportunity. For nearly 2,000 years, it was an impossibility, but now the Ottomans are willing to do that. It is an opportunity. And that will be the beginning of the involvement of Jews in the land of Palestine or the land of Israel. I will use both terms with your permission. So just to understand this whole new policy of the Ottomans that brought the Jewish people back to the country, and the plan was the restoration of the Jewish nation, of course, and nobody spoke about a state yet, but that would be the idea. So in Israel, in Palestine, so to speak, one after the other, you have new buildings built, and you have consulates and churches and hospitals. Do you understand the locals? They've never enjoyed such great services from the Ottomans, and they see those Christian countries are coming to build their own small presence in the area, because if you purchase land and you build a church in a holy place, and there are so many of those, pilgrims will come. And those pilgrims want to enjoy good services, so you build a nice hotel for them. And you build a hospital as well that the locals don't have. You don't understand the level of envy once again. What is going on? These foreigners are our dhimmis. And suddenly, they bring with them so much prosperity and so much good for the people that we don't even enjoy. Something has to be wrong, right? So there is now massive Christian involvement in Jerusalem predominantly, but all over Palestine. And suddenly you see the flag of France on a mast and the flag of Britain in the midst of Ottoman territory. That will bring a lot of resentment. In a way, the conflict started right then. Because until then, there wasn't that much connection between Christians and Muslims. The Muslims lived in the Ottoman Empire, the Christians all around the area. There were no Christians who lived in Ottoman territory or vice versa. For the first time, there is an engagement which is not violent. And the Muslim world understands these guys are way ahead of us. So we cannot enjoy this prosperity because it was only given to those nations. For the Jewish people, once we started coming back home, Great Britain became to be the custodian of the Jewish visitors. So now Palestine is invaded, quote unquote, by those powers, and that's going to change everything. Once again, to show you the map for the last time, that will be Ottoman territory over there. Palestine is over there. You see Russia, Black Sea, etc. Since I promised to give you a break after 50 minutes, I owe you 3 minutes, my precious time, and I'm asking you to be back at 10 o'clock so we can carry on with the second session. Are you all with me somehow? Are you able to follow the... Yeah, thank you, thank you. Please be back at 10 o'clock and we'll carry on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the bus is leaving. And as we say on the tours, we love you, but we'll leave you. Okay, folks, let's move on and carry on because we do have a lot to cover. I'm going to start with this. If I am to point at the two main reasons, specifically, that will lead to the changes in the Ottoman Empire and Palestine, and I will use the term Palestine as long as it was called Palestine, At a certain time, it was called the Land of Israel as well, not state, Land of Israel. And that was when the British Mandate started. But speaking about the Ottomans, we'll speak about the province of Palestine. The Crimean War, the biggest war of the 19th century, bigger than the wars of Napoleon, by the way, was over Crimea and hot water harbors that Russia needed. The Tsar Nikolai, all of Europe is backing the Ottomans, so Russia will not have access to the Mediterranean Sea. And after that, Turkey was in so much of debt, money-wise, to Europe, that that's what led them to design the whole policy of giving rights for the European countries in all around the Turkish Empire, by the way. But of course, the interest was in Palestine, interest was in Jerusalem, and therefore things begin to change in Palestine. Keep in mind that this province was totally neglected even by the Christian world for centuries. Ever since Columbus, so they say, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, the first one to discover the Americas, that took the attention of Europe. To conquer new lands and to find colonies from Africa and the Americas and Australia, New Zealand, you name it, Palestine became to be a destination of pilgrims that came to visit, but very few in number. It was not such a focal place or focal point as it was until the 15th century. All right? So now the Ottomans are more than happy to accommodate those Christian superpowers, and with Ottoman invitation, they're coming back to the land. So the Crimean warfare is number one. By the way, the Red Cross was founded during the Crimean War. And the second reason will be the opening of the Suez Canal. Apologize for the stupid animation. Sometimes it's just fun to do that. In 1869, after 10 years of digging by a French company and a French engineer, Ferdinand de Lesseps, they opened the Suez Canal. That will become a focal point to the whole diplomacy of the world, all right, in years to come. And even today, the Suez Canal is a strategic area. Egypt's main source of income is charging the boats and ships going through the Suez Canal. Because of the Houthis in Yemen, as we speak, most of the world maritime trade is not going through the Suez Canal anymore. See what it does? It goes all around Africa. Did you experience any shortage in the line of supplies over in America? Rising prices? One reason is the Suez Canal. So when the canal was open, it became to be immediately a focal point to all the European diplomacy. Who will own the canal? Who will have the rights to use the canal? And as it happened back in the days, Great Britain won the race. The canal was opened in 1869, and the rights for it and the money was made by the Hadib. That was the title of the Sultan's second in command, or the ruler of Egypt was called the Hadib. He had all the shares, and since he was in a financial need, Britain bought his shares. By the way, it's just a short anecdote, if I may. It was in the days of Queen Victoria, and Great Britain orchestrated a plan secretly to buy the canal. Everybody wanted the canal, all right? And the Turks understood it's a great moneymaker. We can make a fortune out of it. And since the British did not want to make it public they're interested, one day somebody knocks on the doors of Lord Nathaniel Rothschild, the Rothschild family, a Jewish lord, and that was his Secretary of State, Benjamin the Israeli, Prime Minister, and he says, Mr. Rothschild, His Majesty or Her Majesty needs 10 million pounds sterling by tomorrow morning. And Rothschild is asking, has the British crown went bankrupt? So no, that's secret. She doesn't even know that I'm asking on her behalf. The following day, the 10 million sterling pounds were in the bank, and the purchase of the canal was completed. So Great Britain is now the owner of the Suez Canal, and the way that Britain became an empire was usually to start with an investment, and then you send the army to protect the investment. By the way, that's how China begins as well, investment. They don't send the army yet, but if they learn something from the British, that would be the next step, all right? So now we have Great Britain controlling the Suez Canal, and if you control the canal, you see the advantages, right? It cuts the journey to India, for example, the Far East, 4,000 miles shorter than to go through the whole continent of Africa. And also, if you have it in British hands, that would be an essential link between Great Britain and India, the largest and wealthiest colony of the British Empire. So you see the location of Palestine, a place that nobody cared about for a long time, once again has its strategic significance. And if we zoom in, that's how it looks like, just some old pictures of the Suez Canal. But if you zoom in, that's what you see basically. Which means if you want to protect the Suez Canal, you do not establish your line of defense right on the banks of it. You want to have some strategic depth. So east of the canal is the whole Sinai Peninsula. It took Moses 40 years to lead the people through the Sinai Peninsula. That's a great no man's land, a great protection of the canal. And what's right behind the Sinai Peninsula? Palestine. Which means if we want to be effectively protecting the canal, we need to have some investments in Palestine. Because Palestine will be now the front line of the British Empire protecting its new investment. And if Great Britain is interested in anything, so will be the Prussians, and so will be the Spaniards, and so will be the Austro-Hungarians, and so will be the French, obviously, and the Russians. And suddenly Palestine is on everybody's agenda. So two main events, I would say, led to that domino pieces falling that eventually will bring the Jewish people back to the land. And the modern era to Palestine is the Crimean War and the Suez Canal. Please keep that in mind. Even though the Suez Canal is a major issue as we speak. Let's zoom in to speak about Palestine or Eretz Israel. That will be in Hebrew. All right, Eretz Israel will be the name of Palestine. And here is a quote from one of the many books to try to describe to you what was the position of Palestine at those days. You know that in this little province, for about 200 years, the population wasn't growing. It was in Ottoman hands. The Ottomans did not run that many censuses, but we have enough evidences to tell the population wasn't growing. Now that's not normal. Because you will see that when Jewish money is flowing in to create opportunities, the population will triple in 20 years. And the reason why it wasn't growing would be the feudal system of the Ottoman Empire, the taxation system, the oppression of the locals. So to speak about the indigenous people of the land, there were no such people. People came for a season, they would take a loan from a wealthy Arab landlord, they will buy some seeds, they will pray, so the next season will be a good season. They will sow it, they will harvest it, and if it was a good season, they had to pay 50 to 60% of the crops back to the moneylender. If it wasn't a good season, which is very common, droughts in Israel are very common. You pack up your family and you run for your life, otherwise you will be arrested for not paying the money to the landlord. For years and years and years, the population wasn't growing. In the Middle East, there was a whole phenomenon of raids of Bedouin tribes, nomads, still live today. We are going from place to place, raiding the poor villages, because the Ottomans dedicated zero efforts to any kind of a security, protecting them. They just couldn't care less. Pay your taxes, the rest is your problem. So we speak about a province that was definitely under the radar of the Ottoman authorities, and especially now when the Christians are coming, they will be even in a worse condition. But the population wasn't growing, and as we read in some sources, that in very few cases, people that were born in a certain place died in the same village. They had to leave and they had to run and find other places because of the system in the Ottoman Empire that will be describing Palestine. I do want to say a word about the registration of land because that will become crucial. In the Ottoman Empire, the law was very simple. If you do not farm a land for 3 years, it will be confiscated by the authorities. And since most of the land was not farmed, the authorities confiscated the land, but the idea was, we're going to take this private land and offer it to the highest bidder, because we need the money. Now, the highest bidder may be a Christian country, and as we said earlier, this is a violation of Sharia law, basically. Muslim land is not to be sold to non-Muslims. They needed the money. And therefore, Wealthy bankers and moneylenders, all Arabs, took the opportunity and purchased huge estates from the Ottomans, hoping that these will give them significant income. Somebody has to farm the land. Who will farm the land? Who will have the motivation when people know in advance it's not going to work because of the corrupt system? So now you have a very thin layer of wealthy Arabs that own land in Palestine. The land doesn't give them any revenue whatsoever. We want to get rid of it. Who will be the potential customers? The Christian countries, but also the Jews. Hey, there was an opportunity now. The Ottomans are willing to sell. We are waiting patiently and praying to return to Zion for years and years. Now it's possible. And you would assume that everybody will take the chance and immediately, no. It took a long time to change the mindset of the Jewish people that the time is right to go back home and start as a nation all over again. It will happen in a few decades, but not right away. So when you speak about the laws of the land, they are important to understand how things have evolved a little later on. I'm just going to run some of it. I just spoke about, I told you, not very disciplined as a speaker. This is registering the land that I covered to you in the last few minutes. And in a very short time, people in Jerusalem, for example, see this. Look at these beautiful buildings and structures, all built by European superpowers that have the right to purchase land, and they build the consulates and a brand new hospital, a beautiful hotel and coffee shops, and it's only for the usage not of the locals, but those foreigners that come to Palestine now as pilgrims, as diplomats, as visitors. We have 3,000 literally compositions of travelers to Palestine in the 19th century. Mark Twain, maybe the most famous one, because of a book that he wrote called Innocents Abroad. It's funny, but the man was funny, all right? And they all tell the same story. 3,000 tell the same story. Palestine is a devastated land, covered with marshes and swamps. Very few people live in impoverished villages. So who are the indigenous, peaceful people that lived in Palestine once upon a time? It never existed. So in Palestine, these are the new things which are growing. You do understand the envy of the locals. It's in Jerusalem. You come to visit the city, everything here was built. Consulates, for example. So if a French is coming to visit Palestine and he committed a crime, there was an issue. He will be judged by the French law, and France will be the custodian of all the French that come to Jerusalem to visit. Now, Britain was kind enough, I'm not being sarcastic, to give the same protection to Jewish visitors. Because until then, a Jewish man goes to visit the Western Wall in Jerusalem and something happens, who will protect him from the Ottoman law? One reason why people hesitated to come is it wasn't safe. They did, but not in large numbers. Now it's safe. Now if something happens to you, while visiting Jerusalem, while visiting Galilee, you know that you are protected by the whole British Empire. That will be a first move for people to come and feel safe in Palestine or in Israel. So that will be the new appearance of Jerusalem, and just a list of people that visited Palestine as a result of this new atmosphere. Suddenly, everybody, even the President of the United States of America, Ulysses Grant, and all the others, the emperors and the czars and all the dignitaries, because Palestine became to be a magnet. The Suez Canal, a new atmosphere, and the Jews also wanted to be part of that new approach and this prosperity, but somebody had to have the vision. Somebody had to say, hey guys, something amazing happens. The Ottomans are willing to sell. Let's get together, let's go back home, let's build our country once again. It wasn't natural to many Jews to think like that, which is amazing. But you need to know, until the end of the 19th century, the Jewish people around the world were not thinking in national terms. The focus was on religion, not on the nation. Something had to happen to change that mindset. So this rare combination, once in 2,000 years, the Ottomans are willing, the Europeans are back, they are willing to accommodate us and protect us as well. Let's go back home and start all over again. So just to show you how much interest was there in Palestine, and now some reading material. That's how the land looked like. It's not my impression. Just take a minute to read the impression of visitors that came to visit Palestine in the second half of the 19th century. And my point is very clear. The world is following this narrative of the indigenous, peaceful people that covered the land. No, that was not the case. The Ottomans only had one reliable census. That was in 1880, and the number of people in the country was 140,000. That's it. 25% were Jews, including the Bedouin tribes that used to raid in a season and go back to Egypt and go to Saudi Arabia. They were also included in the census. So who were the indigenous hundreds of thousands, millions of people that lived in Palestine? They never really existed. And you can read those documents, which are really fascinating. It will give you the right impression how the land used to look like. Sea of Galilee, many of you have been there, looks much nicer today. But just an idea. And as I said, these are just samples. There are thousands of such descriptions of how the land used to look like and the population as well. Meanwhile, since there was an opportunity, a very influential Jewish British businessman by the name of Moses Montefiore is going to visit the Sultan in Istanbul in 1864, and he's asking permission. He's not representing Britain and not France. He represents the Jewish people. It is true that Queen Victoria gave him a very nice letter of recommendation. So she was the person behind maybe. And the Sultan says, you know what? Jews can also purchase land in Palestine. Because the story is that the Jews came to steal. The Jews robbed. The Jews expelled the locals in order to get their land. Well, that's how it started. So now officially the Ottomans acknowledge the Jews also have some rights in Palestine. And if they want to buy the land, give us the money. And if you have the money, you can also have land. Now keep in mind, there was a reason why you want to purchase land. People supposed to come to live on it. It wasn't just to have a piece of property for end times to go and invest. It was something practical. You're going to buy the land, and then the question was, who are the people that will follow? By the way, you see the coat of arms of the Montefiore family. He was the only lord ever that the Britain gave permission to have in the coat of arms two words, which were not English. It says Jerusalem, and it says Zion. Yerushalayim veTzion. And you see that, something that you cannot read on the coat of arms. That's what it says in Hebrew. Just an anecdote. And you see the Lion of Judah on the left-hand side. And the deer of Israel and the British lion. That will be the meaning of the coat of arms of Montefiore. Let's speak about the population. Who are the people who lived in Palestine? How many were there? And what was the composition? Well, just some pictures from Jewish families and Arab families, etc. I did mention to you earlier that since the Arab landlords have now huge estates and they don't have anybody to farm them, they simply import people from all around the Middle East. I just bought a big piece of land. I need somebody to cultivate the land. We do have some peasants here, but they're not very motivated. I'll bring you in. So these people were brought in from all around the Middle East. They are considered today to be Palestinians. They are considered today the indigenous people of the land. They were not. We speak about workers. Some came legally and some came illegally. And if life was decent, you bring the family with you and you become the people of the land. So today when people speak about the indigenous Palestinians and those who lived there forever and ever, these are the people we're talking about. Many of them not even Arabs. You come from the Caucasus Mountains, you're a Cherkess, you can be a Druze, you can be from different nationalities, different religions, but since you live in Palestine, today you'll be considered, and their descendants, officially by the UN, as refugees. So that's how we are making the problem even bigger than it was supposed to be. I'll show you in a minute a guidebook that was published by the British Foreign Office. We'll get there in a minute. At the same time, Christians are coming as well. Templars coming from Germany. Templars not like the Crusaders Knights. We'll speak about a group of German Templars come from Baden-Württemberg, and they purchase land. They build 5 communities. They're still there, by the way. Not the Germans, but the communities. A ship leaves the shores of Maine, United States of America, in 1866, led by a pastor by the name of John Adams, not the president, the pastor, with 300 people. They go to Palestine because that's the Holy Land. The Ottomans are willing to sell. We believe that Jesus will come only if we live in Palestine. That was the philosophy. And the Templars. So suddenly everything changes. The land is covered by multiple people, ethnicities, groups of people, coexisting quite well. There was no conflict yet because these people brought blessing to the land. They brought money with them. They created jobs. The first modern water pump was brought to Palestine by the German Templars. There were no roads in the country until the Germans came to pave the very first roads. We speak about the middle of the 19th century. The world was much more modern. It never reached Palestine until the 19th century, and the Jews will be part of that prosperity as well. So speaking about the population, it's important to remember and to note all these things, because later on there will be a big question about who are these people that made this peaceful nation. You know what to do when I'm holding this, huh? I apologize once again. And this will be the last time for today. Well, since Mr. Montefiore had purchased land, people are coming over. It's not a national enterprise yet. Jewish people are fleeing persecution. In Western Europe, Jews were emancipated. It's a different story. But in Russia, under the Tsar, remember Fiddler on the Roof, way into the 20th century? People lived in terrible conditions. So now there are some rumors that a Jewish wealthy person bought some land in Palestine and is looking for people to go and live on that land. The first people to make the first move were Russian Jews, Jews from Yemen that were severely persecuted by the local Muslims. By the way, Yemenite Jews developed a certain habit. If my wife is pregnant and your wife is pregnant and I have a son and you have a daughter, let's decide that the minute they are born, they are a married couple. Sounds crazy, huh? Because what they did in Yemen, they would simply take Jewish babies and raise them as Muslims, but the Yemenis law said you cannot do that by separating couples. So here's the trick. If it works, and I have a son, you have a daughter, well, the minute they're born, they're married. That will be the level of oppression and persecution that dhimmis suffered in Muslim countries. So the first Jews to come were people that fled from oppression. That's not colonialism. People came because they had to run for their lives. And the first people came either from Russia or from Yemen, and that will be the beginning of it. I cannot even speak about Zionism, not yet. We speak about people that have a need to protect their lives, and Palestine is now an opportunity. I'm going to run this one through, and I'm sorry for the boring information. I think it matters. Just an idea of population. How many people lived in Jerusalem, for example, at every given moment? Because the Arab narrative says constantly, there were no Jews in Jerusalem, there were no Jews in the land. The Jewish people are not connected to the land of Israel. Here are the figures taken from the Ottoman sources, and you do understand that the population begins to rise in Palestine, but the question is, for what reason? What was the motivation of Arabs to come back now to the land that they left by the thousands? The answer is Jewish money. I know it's making everything very simplified, but once people come, and they come from a developed continent, and they know how to drill for water, and they know how to farm the land, And if two people are improving the land and now we need 20 workers that we don't have, somebody will come to enjoy the prosperity. So the rumor is spread all around the Middle East. Go to Palestine. It's much better over there. People did not know that they're going to enjoy prosperity the Jews created, but who cares? Life is better. We may be protected by the Christian powers there, so we will not suffer the oppression of the Ottomans, and life will be better. So you go for yourself and you check things out, and if the Jews treat you fairly because you work in the farms, you bring the family over. And in a very short time, demographics dramatically change. From about 140,000 people in 1880 to close to 500,000 20 years later. That's not natural increase. We speak about immigration. We speak about illegal immigration. So demographics will start changing as a result of the prosperity the Jewish money is creating. And here is the situation of the Arabs in Palestine, give or take. I just covered the numbers, give or take, just to point at that fact which I will ask you to remember. And also, they always say that Israel or Palestine was basically an Arab country. Not necessarily so. I want to run this one through with your permission, and please read the comment over there. This is an official publication of the British Foreign Office about who are the people that live on the western side of Palestine. So once you speak about the indigenous Palestinian people, well, here we have a proof. We don't speak about Arabs even. We speak about Arab speaking. Greeks and Albans and Afghans and from all around the world that live in small communities in Palestine. So once again, the land was not really Arab, and there were no indigenous nation that lived in the land. And again, I only give you an example. 50 different languages. 50 different languages. That indicates multiple people. Here was the land purchase of the first private initiatives. This was the land purchased by the Jews. The map is over there. Because most of the Arabs lived on the mountains. Now, you do not know the country's geography unless you've been there, but you do see the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. The coast is covered by swamps and marshes filled with malaria, filled with cholera. Nobody wants to live there. For the Jews, an opportunity. We'll buy the land that nobody wants. And then you read those documents, and it makes you pull your head over. The Arabs did not understand why these idiots are willing to pay that much money for a wasteland, a land that nobody wants. Because these idiots knew how to drain the swamps, and how to drill for water, and how to farm the land, and they had a great motivation about coming back home, fleeing persecution, something that the local Arab peasants did not have. You do understand the envy once again. How come these guys' fields are so beautiful, and the orchards are producing tons and tons of oranges? Jaffa oranges will be known all around the world. And our people are lazy, producing nothing. What happened with Islam? We're supposed to be superior. How come they are so progressive and we are not? We always ignore that aspect. Don't. It's important to understand what will be the approach, and still, it is not a national issue, not from the Jewish side, and not from the Arab side as well. That will happen a little later on. So, we spoke about the Jewish immigration to Palestine, purchasing land, and then to answer to the claim that you hear sometimes that the Jews came to steal our land. David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, the head of the provisional government and the leader of the Zionist movement, we'll get to that in a minute, that was doctrine. We do not buy land that people farm already. We don't want to be accused by anybody that we stole somebody's land. And as Jews, we don't do that. We are going to invest our capital in places which are not populated, inviting the locals to join in. We do want to bring prosperity to the whole country and not just the Jewish people. Because you hear it so many times. The Jews stole our land. How do you steal land when the Ottomans are still there? And there was some kind of law and order, and that was the official doctrine. of the Jewish pioneers or the Jewish refugees that started coming back to Palestine. That was the land purchase. So we are not going to mix the two populations together. And here are the words of a very prominent Arab leader, the Sharif of Mecca. That's what he thought about Jews coming back to the land. Some Arabs were very much for it because they understood the Jews returning to Palestine will bring blessing to the whole Arab world. He'll be very effective and important during the First World War. If somebody remembers the movie Lawrence of Arabia, and maybe some of you have seen the movie, a good one by the way, he's going to be a key player in order to understand what happened later. So when we speak about the Arab narrative, I think that we can easily say that this is not exactly historical facts. We speak about narrative and just bring that to conclusion. By the way, they always say, listen, before Zionism, we'll clarify that later, Jews and Arabs lived peacefully side by side. There were no problems. We have no problem with the Jews. A problem is the state of Israel. The problem is the Zionists that came to steal our land. Well, let me tell you how well and how peacefully Jews and Arabs lived together side by side. Once again, take a minute and just read some of the information, just a very short selection. There are tons and tons of documents that speak about this. All right? And these are not Jewish documents. So speaking about we lived together peacefully without any problems, well, that's what peacefully living together means from the view of the Arabs or the Palestinians. Here is another one, and so forth and so forth. So this is an absolute legend, so to speak, and a lie. The Jews were treated fairly in Arab countries. By definition of being dhimmi, that's an impossibility. And the last one, and as I said, you can check it out. There are so many documents that speak about the way the Jews were treated by the Arabs. But now, when you're going to Palestine and you are custodian of the British Empire, they protect you. That's why people felt secure to come, not to be under that kind of pressure of Jews in Arab countries. So just some examples about how well and how peacefully people live together. So we spoke about this idea of individuals, land was purchased, families left their home and went to Palestine. It was not a national issue yet, but it will be once the Zionist movement is going to be born. I have to take a sidetrack for a minute. If you had talked about a Jewish nation to a Jewish individual in the middle of the 19th century, he would not be excited about the whole idea. The idea was that we live in the diaspora. We want to focus to our Jewish religion and not to a nation, because finally in Western Europe we are emancipated. We enjoy equal rights. That's what we wanted to accomplish, to be recognized as people, not being discriminated. In Western Europe, that was the case. If we start speaking about a nationality now, we may lose everything we've accomplished. Because people tell us, if you live in France, we expect you to be French by your nationality and not Jewish. You be of any religion that you want, but you have to embrace our nationality. If you live in Germany, we expect you to be a German and loyal to Germany and then practice any religion. If you embrace the Jewish aspect of nationalism, you may be confronted by your friends and your neighbors. So who are you? Are you loyal to the Jewish nation? Are you loyal to our nation? You may lose everything that you worked so hard to accomplish, which means equal rights like all the others around you. You understand the problem here? By the way, American Jews sometimes are confronted with the question even today. Who are you loyal to? Israel? America? The issue is very much there. So for that reason, the Jews on purpose decided we are not going to speak about the nation. We are fully emancipated. We want to be part of the local societies. We'll be Jewish, but not too Jewish, if I may say so. That will be the compromise. So somebody had to have the vision. So just say, just a minute now, there's an opportunity. Forget about the comfort of life now. We can regather, we can recruit the money, and let's go back home and have a nation once again. And that visionary will be a man called Theodor Herzl. Some of you may have heard the name. A Jewish man who lived in Vienna in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was born in Budapest, but moved to Vienna. A man that was not very religious in his Jewish conduct, like most of the Jews that were emancipated. They will have a different outfit. They will go to universities, even to the army. They really were integrated into the local societies with one main problem. By law, you're permitted to go and study in a university, but nobody is obligated to employ you after you finish your studies. You understand the problem? You may be the best student in class, but once you graduate, you won't find a job. Because the fact that the states decided to emancipate everybody, that was one thing. The population wasn't that keen about that. We speak about very sheer anti-Semitism, yes, from the European Christian society. So for the Jews, that was a dilemma. We left the old way of life. We want to be blended in. We got our rights finally, but practically it doesn't change our lives on a daily basis. So sometimes some excellent Jewish doctors will get together to have their own private clinic because nobody will employ them. And guess what? That clinic could be the best one in town. Sometimes it brings more hatred. It brings more envy. You understand my point? But there was no way to go back to the Orthodox world that we just left. So we left the old Jewish way of life. The locals don't want us in the midst. We have an opportunity, Palestine. Let's go back home. Somebody had to grab the moment and to say it is an opportunity. And that somebody was Mr. Herzl, the founding father of the nation, so to speak. We call him the visionary of the state of Israel. And Herzl wrote a book in 1898 that was called The Jewish State, and he prophesied, so to speak, within 50 years there will be a homeland for the Jewish people. Israel was born exactly 50 years after the book was published. So now we have a national vision and not just an individual one, but the question is, what led him to that conclusion? Herzl worked as a reporter for a newspaper, and he was sent by his newspaper to Paris, France, to cover the trial of one Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish French army officer. The fact that you have Jews serving in the French army, that was the essence of emancipation. Okay, because Jewish soldiers was an oxymoron. Jews don't know how to be soldiers. All right? They are cowards. That's what happened for the last so many hundreds of years. We can't really trust them. That will be, once again, the essence of anti-Semitism. They will betray you whenever they can. But now it's a new atmosphere, and Jews join the army. And there was false accusations against Dreyfus that he was selling secrets to the German army. Keep in mind that France and Germany are not in good terms. Another war was just over 1870 that France was defeated severely by Germany. So the whole atmosphere is very suspicious. Somebody betrayed us. It was impossible to be beaten by the Germans so easily. The classical conspiracy, the classical scapegoat, it must be the Jews who betrayed us. And they appointed Captain Dreyfus. He sold secrets to Germany. False accusations, proven later on it was an officer by the name of Esteban Esterházy from Hungarian descent, but that's not the story. So Herzl is going to cover the trial. I promise the last time. Well, we'll make this one the last time. Paris, France, and Herzl is quite in a shock. Because once a Jewish officer was accused for treason, it brought a wave of anti-Semitism right in your face, not covered all around France. And Herzl was in a shock. France, a stronghold of democracy, the French Revolution. In France, everybody speaks about the Jews that betrayed us. So for Herzl, that was quite a shock. And he was the one to put one and one together to say, okay, most likely we will never be accepted by the locals. We are emancipated, but it's more declarative, it's not practical. The Ottomans are willing to sell some land. It's time to go back home. And in order to make a national vision out of it, he sends letters to Jewish leaders around the world asking them to come to a conference. The conference will be held in Basel in Switzerland. They wanted to hold it basically in Munich, but the local Jewish community was against that, all right? I'll get to that in a minute. So it had to be in a neutral location. 69 leaders show up. He was hoping to have thousands. 69 people show up. And in that occasion, the 28th of August, 1897, they declare the establishment of a new movement, which is Jewish, national, secular, that will be called the Zionist movement. Zion is a place in Jerusalem. The Bible says that when David conquers Jebus, he conquered the citadel of Zion. Zion is a mountain in Jerusalem, Temple Mount. 19 times the Bible speaks about Mount Zion. It's always Mount Moriah. All right? So in order to establish a new movement, they take a name that was not that connected to anything and give it a new meaning. The Zionist movement has one objective: bring the Jewish people back home so they can celebrate their independence and the national way of life once again. I will believe that all of you in this room are Zionists. If you believe that the Jewish people have the right to live in Israel as free people, according to biblical promises, that will make you a Zionist. Now, I do know that this term recently has a terrible press. It's considered to be a very derogatory term because Zionism is necessarily destruction of the Arabs. Says who? Where do you find it? In what document in the Jewish world anybody spoke about destroying the others? You won't find it. Here's a challenge for you. You try to find just one example of an Israeli Jewish prominent leader that ever delivered a message that Israel, the Jewish state, wants to destroy the Arabs. One example. You won't find it because it's not there. And you go and check. Today, Google, easy. I can show you thousands of messages delivered by Arab leaders as we speak. Destruction of the Jews, destruction of the state of Israel. You go and check. I'll be here until Friday morning. If you find one example of a prominent Israeli Jewish leader that speaks about destroying, conquering, ethnically cleansing, please show me, because I want to educate myself. Don't bother, you won't find it. All right? So now there was a new vision, and the vision is a national vision. The Jewish people are going to get together. We're going to found our institutions. We're going to found an agency that will be called the Jewish Agency, and this will have one purpose: to recruit money from the Jewish world to buy land in Palestine. It's no longer private enterprise. The whole nation had spoken. I have to take a side turn for a minute. Not all the Jews are very interested in being Zionists, even today. Even today, many Jewish people around the world are not Zionists. In Israel, as we speak, about 1.5 million Jewish people that call themselves ultra-Orthodox do not believe that Zionism is part of God's plan. They will say, and that was the approach of most of the Jewish world, we should not take matters in our hands. The Bible speaks about the restoration. Only God knows the timing. We should be praying for it. We should be anticipating it. We should not take action because He knows the timing and we don't. And if indeed that was God's will, then it should happen in the blink of a second, peacefully. The Jewish entity should be a theocracy and not a democracy. It will happen in the blink of a second and will bring peace to the whole region. And their argument is there was not much peace in the region anyhow. And therefore, the Zionist dream is not part of God's plan. People took matters in their hands against God's will, and therefore we are not part of it. And it's not few people. We'll speak about quite many, including the Jewish world outside of Israel. So not all the Jews are Zionists, because once Zionism proclaimed itself to be a secular movement, which means you leave aside many people that don't only want to focus on the nation of Israel, but also on the religion, and it's complicated. Being Jewish, it's a nationality and a religion. And you choose which one you want to follow. Or maybe the two should be on the same level. There was a crisis. The biggest crisis in the Jewish world was the founding of the Zionist organization. We are divided ever since about who believes in what. But now we do have a national enterprise, and Mr. Herzl is behind that. And the Congress was a partial success, but that was the beginning of it. And now we have the Jewish Agency, and they found the JNF, which is also responsible, and this exists until this very day. All these institutions are step number one, to create a nationality. And the Congress is convening every year, and they have elections, and they appoint people to different positions, etc. That was step number one. So from the people that will be engaged in a brutal war over the land of Israel, one people made the decision. It's a national issue. There was nobody on the other side to make such a decision. The population of Palestine was not organized as a nation. They did not understand what was going on. So the Jewish people had an advantage, because now we speak about a national enterprise, and that will give us an advantage in the struggle over the land later on. And that's how Palestine used to look like. There wasn't much, as you understand, in the country, just some scenery. The road to Jerusalem. See the road on the left-hand side? That's how the road to Jerusalem used to look like. And we speak about the second half of the 19th century. There are railroads all around Europe, in America, wide roads. The modern era had started. Not in Palestine, not yet. It's going to be thanks to the Jews and to the Templars and some of the others. So now we speak about something that's going to change basically everything. Most of the Jewish immigrants go to live in the cities, but many of them want to live from the land. The whole idea of Zionism was we are going to go back home to Palestine, not just to live in the land, but to farm the land, to be productive as farmers as our ancestors used to be. The problem is, Jews were not permitted to own land anywhere in European countries. There was a reason why we are a nation of bankers and lawyers and doctors and not farmers. Well, since the whole essence of it is to farm the land, somebody has to teach the people how to become farmers. They don't have a clue. So in small farms in Romania, Poland, the Jewish people are learning from the locals how to be farmers once again. And now having the knowledge, are being sent over to Palestine by the Jewish Agency to found a community that will be called a kibbutz. Right? Kibbutz basically is a farming community. People live together. Everybody shares all the property. I'm not speaking about communism, more like socialism. I know it's a negative word in America. We do speak about a new way of life. And also keep in mind that the books of Karl Marx were published only 20, 30 years earlier, a Jewish man, by the way. And they became very popular in Eastern Europe. Because what Marx said, basically, the book is called The Capital, and Friedrich Engels, that people go to war over resources. I'm simplifying everything. And if we are going to share them equally, that will diffuse the motivation to go to war. We all should live equally. Very appealing to people who lived under the oppression of the Tsar in Russia. Not that appealing to Western European Jews that were emancipated already. So when Zionism is born, and we try to implement those socialist ideas, the question was, is it only a theory, or maybe we can live by those principles? The kibbutz was founded to prove it's doable. And you know what? A huge success. The only place in the world that that way of life was successful because other people tried it as well was in Israel. So now you have those people coming over, land was purchased, and they struggle with farming the land, draining swamps. The locals are very upset. So these people have to protect themselves by night and have to farm the land by day, and that's where the conflict begins. Because Christians came to the country not as a competition. They came as holy places to hold them, to build them. The Jews came as a competition. They came to farm the land. They are going to compete with us. They are much more progressive, more modern. We don't stand a chance. How can we resist that? Violently. That's the only way. I hate to admit, even today, terror wins. Terror is working, unfortunately, because too many leaders around the world are too cowards to stand up against it. Terror is working, always had been, and the Arabs learned it very quickly. If we are going to respond violently, we'll get what we want, because the Ottomans want peace, and the British want a peaceful area, and we are the majority anyhow. More about that when we carry on with our sessions. All that brings us to the first very important turning point, WW1. What I'm going to share with you for the next 5 minutes, I do want to be prompt with the sending you away at 11 o'clock, is going to change in the area everything for good. The Ottoman Empire is going to collapse, a new world order in the area, a new Middle East will be created. By whom, by the way? By the victors of the First World War. People that knew nothing about the locals, they knew nothing about the local mentality. They tried to create an area based on the Christian principles in Europe to create nation states in a place that was not familiar with the whole idea of nation states. So the war begins, and I'm sure that some of you still remember high school, and that's how the map looks like basically. On one side, we have Germany and Austro-Hungary and the Ottomans. On the other side, we have Britain, France, and the US will join in 1917. And you see the border between the Ottomans and the British is Palestine. That's the line now. On the eastern side of the Sinai Peninsula, protecting the precious canal. That's how it looks like when the war begins. For Great Britain, there was a major problem. Most of the army is invested on French soil. And some of you do remember, it wasn't a war that armies are maneuvering, dug in trenches, charging each other every few months. Millions of people are killed. It looks like the war came to a standstill. It's not going to end. British politicians had a great idea. Well, let's try to go through the Turkish front line, because Turkey is weak. Turkey was called the sick man of Europe, the Sultan. And if you can recruit the efforts to break through the lines of the Ottomans, the Germans will have to back them up. Using the sources from France, it will be easy for us to break through the German lines, bring the war to an end. Don't try to understand every detail, just the big picture. Well, the British needed allies in the Middle East because there were not enough British troops in the area. Who will be a potential ally to help Great Britain? Well, the local Arabs. They hated the Ottomans. Keep in mind, Muslims but not Arabs. The Ottomans are Turks, and the Turks are not Arabs. So for the Muslim mindset to have Mecca and Medina, the two holy places, dominated by non-Arabs, is also a disgrace. So the Arabs were potential allies of Great Britain in the war against the Ottoman Empire, and they started negotiating with them. Negotiation took place between the governor of Egypt, a man by the name of Henry McMahon, and he approached the Sharif of Mecca, all right? His name was Hussein. The title Sharif is given to any Muslim leader who is the protector of Mecca and Medina. That will be an honorary title. If you see for Mecca and Medina, you are the Sharif. And Great Britain begins to negotiate. And the question is, of course, if we'll help you in the war, what will we get in return? That was the question of the Sharif of Mecca. And Britain is very generous because they need the support. And after a few months of negotiations, that's the agreement. This land is going to be allocated as an Arab kingdom. After the war will be over, the Sharif of Mecca will be proclaimed the king of the Arabs. Quite a lot of territory, huh? Two exceptions. Palestine will not be part of it, because for the British mindset, to liberate Palestine and Christians will dominate the place once again after centuries of Muslim domination and hand it over to the Muslims once again was too much to concern. So these are the exceptions. Palestine will not be part of the Arab kingdom. Looks very promising, huh? Looks something that you really want to join in order to get that position as the king of the Arabs. By the way, who accepted his position as king of the Arabs? Nobody in our world was for it, but nobody was asking the people because there were no people to ask. We speak about tribes, minding their own business, always fighting against each other. So that's the agreement. And the Sharif of Mecca, since he doesn't know exactly what does it mean, modern warfare, is asking for help, and a man is sent by the British. He will be called Lawrence of Arabia, or Thomas Edward Lawrence, will be the one to organize an Arab army, so to speak, and to go and help the British Empire. And they do the job. They were hoping to recruit about 100,000, 2,000 people showed up. That's it, 2,000 people. But the promise was made. So after the war is over, this whole area is dedicated now to be an Arab kingdom. What the Arabs did not know, the Great Britain very typically, and I do have some unfriendly sentiments toward the British, and you'll see the reason later on. Great Britain started negotiating with France over dividing the land they are going to conquer. Two negotiators, Mark Sykes from the British side and Roger Picot from the French side, are simply dividing the Middle East to two future spheres of influence. One for the British, one for the French. No countries are mentioned because there are no countries. They simply mark a line in the desert, and that will be the new Middle East, forgive me for that, according to the Sykes-Picot agreement. I know it's not easy to follow and to understand, but you do see that the land is divided. Interesting, what says over there, Zone A. Can you see the Zone A over there? And Zone B. This land was promised to the Sharif of Mecca only a few months earlier. The French don't know about that, let alone the Arab gentleman had no clue that the land that the British promised him was also promised to the French. You do understand what will happen after the war is over. All hell will break loose because Great Britain made too many promises they could not keep. In their distress, they created a problem that we still live until this very day. Just to try to keep everybody happy because Britain's reputation is on the line. If you don't keep your word, nobody will support you ever in the future. So for now, the Middle East is divided to two different areas. Kind of zooming into Palestine, you see the way it's supposed to be divided. And if that's not enough, in November 2nd of 1917, Lord Rothschild, that we mentioned earlier, the one that recruited the money to buy the Suez Canal for Queen Victoria, is receiving a letter, and the letter says very clearly that His Majesty, King George V, will see in favor the establishment of a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. This document is called the Balfour Declaration. By the way, when it was the 100-year celebration of it, the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas said he's going to sue Great Britain in international whatever forum because of the Balfour Declaration. All right, so three promises to three people contradicting each other almost necessarily. You begin to sense the chaos, right? After the war will be over. By the way, when Russia, after the Bolshevik Revolution, left the war, Leib Trotsky, some of you may know the name, published that agreement that was secret, the Russians did, to show the world how corrupt is the capitalist world. All the conspiracy, all the trickery. So the world is knowing about what was going on because of the Soviet regime wants to show them, because they were part of the negotiations. Russia also wanted the peace. But after the Tsar was gone, they left the war, they left negotiations, and they showed the whole world the hypocrisy of the British and the French. They cannot be trusted because the capitalists come with us, the communists. We are much more honest in the way that we conduct business. So the Balfour Declaration is a very important document. It has two major problems in it. Number one, what is Palestine? The place was never defined by clear borders. You can have your Palestine, I can have mine. There was no such a place with clear borders. So what is Palestine? How much of it is allocated to the Jewish homeland? It doesn't say that. And what is a Jewish homeland? Is it an autonomy? Is it a state? Not very clear. These are the questions on the table until this very day. But your question should be, just a minute now, even when this one was given, there was a majority of Arabs in the land. How come Great Britain is not recognizing the right of the local Arabs to have a national home in Palestine? The answer is, if you don't see yourself as a nation, you do not understand the concept, how can anybody recognize you as a nation? And for that reason, the document says, without violating the rights of local ethnic groups. By the way, this document will be embraced by the League of Nations. It became to be world policy, embraced by the United Nations that replaced the League of Nations. And until this very day, interesting to note because it's changing as we speak, the only document in which the world believes that Palestine is the homeland for the Jewish people is the Balfour Declaration. Changing because as we speak, there was a United Nations conference held in New York, and country after country recognizing a Palestinian state. If it's going to be a United Nations official policy, that will replace this. But as for now, the only document that the world is following, so to speak, is the Balfour Declaration about who owns the land and who has the right for the land. So keep in mind those promises made by Great Britain and what will be the outcome after the war will be over. I would like to bring it to conclusion here, and I owe you 6 minutes because I went a little too far. Folks, we covered a lot. I mean, I'm not sure how much you can really follow if anybody takes notes, but if you go back home and you just, go Google and do some little research for yourselves, that will be a blessing to me. Because let's be honest, right? You hear something, you go back home, you turn on the TV, you watch 20 seconds and you have an opinion and you know what's going on. How many will really go to do some research? Let's really study the issue. I have no illusions, most people not. But if you have just a little bit of curiosity and you go to do some research, that will be a blessing, I think that for you, but also for me. Because the truth matters. And the facts are important. And I will encourage you once again, please, do not trust what you hear from me. You go and you confirm, all right? And go and verify. I can make mistakes because you can only make a decent opinion about something when you know the facts. At least that was my purpose. So thank you for coming, and we'll see how many come in tomorrow morning. I'm curious to see how many of you thought, well, this is just boring history, or maybe you enjoyed some of the 2 lectures of today. Thank you.